He unified China. He built the Great Wall. He created the Terracotta Army. If you think you know Emperor Qin Shi Huang, what you know is a historical symbol condensed into 3 words. The real him was 10,000 times more absurd than that. He ascended the throne at 13 and, by 39, had unified a continent that had been divided for 500 years. He ruled tens of millions of people in an era without telephones, the internet, or automobiles. He standardized writing, currency, and weights and measures. He built a nationwide road network. He constructed an underground palace that no one has dared to open to this day, one that may contain 100 tons of liquid mercury and mechanical crossbows that have been waiting to be triggered for 2,000 years. And he himself died from the poison he drank, the very elixir his alchemist had told him would grant him eternal life. A man who unified the entire known world was poisoned by his own dream of immortality. If you think you know Emperor Qin Shi Huang, you do not know him. He was born Yingzheng in 259 BCE in Handan, the capital of the state of Zhao. His father was then serving as a hostage sent by the state of Qin to Zhao. The very fact of being held hostage in a foreign land speaks volumes about the political landscape of 3rd century BCE China. The 7 major states had been at war with one another for nearly 500 years, the Warring States period, each more brutal than the last, each developing increasingly ingenious methods of mass slaughter. Just a few years before Yingzheng's birth, during the Battle of Changping in 260 BCE, the renowned Qin general Bai Qi, after the state of Zhao surrendered, did not accept the prisoners of war. Instead, he had over 400,000 surrendered Zhao soldiers buried alive. This figure may sound exaggerated today, but it is recorded in multiple independent historical sources, and modern archaeology has uncovered massive mass graves near the Changping battlefield with bones bearing clear marks of hacking. 40,000 people died in a single place. How many pits would that fill? Yingzheng was born into this environment and grew up in it. His father was a hostage. His homeland had just massacred 400,000 people. The first lesson he learned in his life was that power is the only security and violence is the only reliable language. He ascended the throne at 13, but he did not truly seize power until he was 22. During those 9 intervening years, a powerful minister named Lu Buwei maintained an ambiguous relationship with his mother. Historians still debate this period, but one thing is certain. As soon as Yingzheng began to rule in his own right, his first act was to expel Lu Buwei from the court, execute Lu Buwei's associate Lu Buwei by dismemberment, and the 2 children Luo Ai had with his mother were stuffed into sacks and beaten to death. This is what he did at the age of 22. He was not one to ease into things. He started at full speed. From the age of 22 to 38, Yingzheng accomplished something no one before him had ever achieved. He conquered the other 6 states one by one: Han, Zhao, Wei, Chu, Yan, and Qi, over the course of 16 years, averaging more than 1 state every 2 years. This was not merely a matter of military prowess. It was a comprehensive domination spanning politics, diplomacy, espionage, economics, and logistics. He relied heavily on a group of individuals of humble origins but extraordinary talent: Li Si, Wang Jian, and Meng Tian. He didn't care about your background. He only cared whether you could help him win. In an era that placed extreme importance on noble lineage, this was a revolutionary approach to talent selection. In 221 BCE, the last state, Qi, surrendered. Yingzheng was 38 years old. All of China was unified. He needed a new title. Previous rulers were called king, but that term was no longer sufficient. His ministers proposed a solution, combining the character Huang from the 3 sovereigns of ancient times with the character Di from the 5 emperors, creating the title Huangdi, Emperor. As he was the first, he was named the first emperor. He established the rule that subsequent emperors would be called the second, third, and so on, for 10,000 generations. This was the plan for the future devised by a man who had unified the realm. Yet there was one variable in his plan he had not anticipated. He himself died too soon. His subsequent actions have been the subject of repeated debate throughout history. Which were great achievements and which were acts of cruel tyranny? The answer is both, and they stemmed from the same set of decisions. He standardized the written script. Before him, the 7 states used 7 different scripts. Now, they were all unified into Qin seal script. This allowed information to flow freely throughout the empire, an extraordinarily advanced standardization initiative. He standardized weights and measures. A jin weighed the same everywhere, and a qi measured the same length everywhere. He standardized currency, introducing the round Qin coin with a square hole. He built a network of imperial highways radiating from Xianyang, the Qin dynasty's version of a highway system. There is also a detail rarely mentioned today. He standardized the distance between wheel axles, mandating that the width between the two wheels of every horse-drawn carriage must be identical. Since wheels leave ruts on dirt roads, if all wheels were the same width, the width of ruts across the nation would be uniform, and carriages could travel on any road. This was an engineer's approach to imperial integration, astonishingly detailed, yet chillingly cruel, for these policies were enforced with iron-fisted authority, allowing no dissent, and were implemented through massive forced labor and laws of collective punishment. Local officials who violated any new law were executed, and their families were held accountable. The risk of holding office in the Qin dynasty was that a single administrative error could cost your entire family their lives. Then came the burning of books and burying of scholars, the two acts for which Emperor Qin Shi Huang has been reviled for 2 millennia. The reality is more complex than the reputation suggests. The book burning was real. In 213 BCE, he ordered the destruction of the historical records of the 6 states and all private libraries containing works other than those on agriculture, medicine, and divination. This was a form of cultural genocide, the eradication of intellectual diversity through administrative decree. Whether the burying of scholars actually occurred and on what scale remains a subject of debate among historians to this day. Sima Qian recorded that over 400 scholars and alchemists were buried alive, but this figure and the specific details of the event have been repeatedly questioned by later generations. Regardless of the actual scale, Qin Shi Huang's obsession with controlling thought was real. He could not tolerate anyone suggesting there was any problem with his rule. His zero tolerance for criticism stemmed from a very specific fear. He did not fear war. He had won every battle he fought. What he feared was death. His fear of death was an obsessive fixation. During his reign, he faced at least 3 assassination attempts. The most famous was that of Jing Ke. Jing Ke concealed a dagger inside a scroll of maps and brought it into the Qin king's palace. While demonstrating the map, he drew the dagger and lunged at Ying Zheng. Ying Zheng ran around a pillar while his ministers stood helplessly by, for Qin law prohibited officials from carrying weapons in court. Only Ying Zheng's personal physician, Xia Wujie, struck Jing Ke with his medicine chest, buying Ying Zheng enough time to draw his longsword and strike back. Jing Ke fell only after being struck 8 times by Ying Zheng's sword. Following this assassination attempt, Ying Zheng's fear of death reached a new height. He began searching for the elixir of immortality. He dispatched an alchemist named Xu Fu, accompanied by reportedly 3,000 young boys and girls, to sail out to sea in search of the legendary immortal island of Penglai and the elixir of life. This was a quest for immortality backed by the full might of the nation. Xu Fu returned from his first voyage, reporting that he had found nothing. He needed more money, more ships, and more people. Ying Zheng granted his requests. Xu Fu set sail a second time and never returned. Regarding where Xu Fu went, there are many theories. The most popular one is that he went to Japan. In Xingu City, on Japan's Key Peninsula, there is still a site said to be Xu Fu's tomb. There are over a dozen sites and legends related to Xu Fu throughout Japan. Some Japanese folktales claim that the young boys and girls Xu Fu took with him were among the ancestors of the Japanese people. This has not been verified, but it illustrates one thing. A Taoist alchemist claimed he could find the elixir of immortality. The emperor believed him and dispatched a fleet of ships equivalent to a small naval force. This fleet vanished into the sea and never returned. Back in China, Ying Zheng continued to have other alchemists concoct various elixirs for him. He could not stop, for to stop would mean accepting that death is inevitable, and accepting death was the one thing this conqueror of all could never accept. Most of these elixirs contained mercury. The alchemists believed mercury symbolized transformation and was the key to immortality. Ying Zheng trusted them and took these mercury-laced pills daily for many years. This is the most ironic part of the entire story. In his underground palace, he used mercury to simulate a vast sea of rivers to symbolize his eternal rule over the world. Within his own body, he was also ingesting mercury. The mercury underground was a symbol of his immortality. The mercury within his body was his attempt at immortality. In the end, both became part of his death. Modern scientists have detected mercury concentrations far exceeding normal levels in the soil surrounding his mausoleum. At the same time, modern medicine knows that long-term ingestion of mercury compounds can lead to neurological damage, behavioral changes, organ failure, and death. Ying Zheng died suddenly in 210 BCE while on a tour of his empire. He was 49 years old. A man who had conquered the entire known world died in middle age, possibly from the very pills he took daily in pursuit of immortality. His death itself was steeped in Qin-style absurdity. He died while on an inspection tour, accompanied only by the eunuch Zhao Gao, Chancellor Li Si, and his youngest son Hu Hai. His eldest son, Fu Su, had been exiled to serve as a military supervisor at the Great Wall for daring to advise him. Zhao Gao and Li Si decided to keep his death a secret. They forged an imperial edict ordering Fusu's execution, proclaimed Hu Hai as crown prince, and then used a carriage carrying Ying Zheng's corpse back to Xianyang. As the weather was hot, the body began to decompose and emit a foul odor. They added a cart loaded with salted fish to the convoy to mask the smell. The final journey of the first emperor, who had unified China, was spent lying in a carriage reeking of decay, accompanied by a cart of salted fish. After his death, the empire he had established lasted only 15 years. His son, Hu Hai, was a puppet completely controlled by Zhao Gao. Uprisings erupted across the land, and in 206 BCE, the Qin dynasty fell. The blood, sweat, and tears he had poured into unifying the realm were squandered by his descendants in just 15 years. Yet, his mausoleum remains, the final enigma he left behind. Its construction spanned nearly 40 years and mobilized 700,000 workers, a figure equal to the entire population of Rome, the capital of the Roman Empire at the time. The scale of the mausoleum is staggering. The known outer burial area exceeds 56 square kilometers. The Terracotta Army constitutes only a portion of the outermost ring of the complex, while the true underground palace, the Kora, has never been opened to this day. How were the terracotta warriors discovered? It wasn't archaeologists who found them, but a farmer named Yang Jifa. In March 1974, he and several of his brothers were digging a well for water on the outskirts of Xi'an. As they dug, they unearthed the head of a terracotta figurine. Thinking it was an old deity statue buried in the ground, they continued digging. As more and more were unearthed, people realized this was no ordinary find. An archaeological team arrived and excavated approximately 8,000 life-sized terracotta. Each face is unique. No two are alike. This is believed to be because they were modeled after the actual faces of Qin soldiers. 8,000 distinct faces, 8,000 real people from 2,200 years ago have been permanently etched into clay. Each of them had a name, a hometown, and parents and siblings. We don't know their names, but we know their faces. Yang Jifa later became the official autograph signer for the Terracotta Army, signing autographs for visitors at the museum, signing books for visitors. In an interview, he said that the discovery of these artifacts had made his life worse because his fields were expropriated by the government to build the museum, and he received only a meager compensation. The man who unearthed one of humanity's greatest archaeological discoveries makes a living by selling autographed books. Another Qin Shi Huang style irony. Why hasn't the actual underground palace been opened? It's not because of a lack of technology, it's because the cost of opening it is too high. When the Terracotta Army was first unearthed, these clay figures were originally painted with vibrant pigments, but the moment they came into contact with air, the paint began to flake off within 15 seconds. Those gray clay figures you see in photos of the Terracotta Army were once colorful. They turned permanently gray the very instant they were unearthed. The underground palace may contain silk, wood, lacquerware, paper, and pigments. Once exposed to air, these items would be permanently destroyed within minutes. Then, there is the mercury. Scientists estimate there may be as much as 100 tons of liquid mercury in the underground palace. 100 tons. That is enough to poison the entire archaeological team. There are also the mechanical crossbows recorded in historical texts, automatic arrow-firing devices specifically designed to kill tomb raiders. No one knows if they would still function 2,000 years later, nor does anyone particularly want to find out. The latest remote sensing surveys from 2025 reveal a brick wall approximately 4 meters thick surrounding the core area of the underground palace, measuring 390 meters east-west and 460 meters north-south. What lies within? No one knows. Every instrument has only probed from outside that wall. no one has had the courage to venture inside. His tomb has been waiting underground for 2,200 years. His true form has never been seen by any modern person. The 8,000 terracotta warriors he created each have a different face. Everyone is a unique individual, yet not a single one is him. We know how many people he ruled, how many he killed, and how many things he built, but we do not know what he looked like. All his portraits were painted by later generations based on imagination. One of the most powerful figures in human history left no single face that can be verified as authentic. He drank mercury in search of immortality, but the mercury killed him. He used mercury to simulate rivers and streams in his underground palace, but the mercury has left that palace so toxic that no one dares to open it to this day. He unified China and established rules for all future generations, yet his own empire lasted only 2 generations. He was a man who feared death intensely, yet his death was filled with irony. History sometimes possesses a peculiar sense of humor toward those who attempt to control it. The character Huang in First Emperor's title comes from the 3 sovereigns of ancient times. The character Di comes from the 5 emperors. He combined the 2 characters because he believed his achievements surpassed those of all the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. He was not wrong. Not a single one of the 3 sovereigns or 5 emperors ever unified all of China. Not a single one left behind a mausoleum built by 700,000 people. Not a single one's name remains 2,000 years later among the most discussed figures in global history. He wanted immortality. He achieved immortality, just not in the way he imagined. He thought immortality meant living, but the immortality he achieved was being remembered. He has been dead for 2,200 years, yet you are still discussing him today. His plan worked, just in a way he never anticipated.